Hello, I'm Richard Harvey and I'm convening this session and moderating the Q&A portion of today's lecture. For those of you who are curious, I'm a professor of computer science at the University of East Anglia. I'm also a former Gresham College professor, hence the connection with the City of London. Welcome to Knowledge Miles, which are the lectures associated with the 695th Lord Mayor of London. The series is designed to address connections in and around the square mile, what the current Lord Mayor Michael Mainelli calls the world's coffee house. Now, today's lecture is The Art of BS star, how reframing can dramatically change outcomes and performance. And I'm not going to tell you what BS stands for because I'm sure our speaker will do that. Today's speaker is Dowshan Humzah. You can find his abbreviated CV on the Gresham Society website. I'll post a link to that in a moment in the chat. He also has a very spiffy website, ladies and gentlemen, dowshan.com. And I'll post a link to that as well. But as we often say in this series, life is really too short for CVs or resumes if you're watching from the US. We prefer to give the speaker as much time as we possibly can. So over to you, Dowshan.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you to the End Group and Gresham Society. I too am linked with Gresham College as a council member at Gresham College, which is, I should say, unfortunately, the city's best kept secret, when it should be the worst kept secret. So thank you to the Lord Mayor, Michael Mainelli, for having his Knowledge Miles lecture series and working with the Gresham Society to produce that and promote that series. It is indeed Connect to Prosper. And in terms of connecting to prosper, not just in a financial measure, but prospering societally together and with the broad community that we have within the city, and of course out of the city walls across London, the UK, and the rest of the world. So yes, we're here at the world's greatest coffee house, and we'll mention coffee later, as we connect to prosper. So the art of BS. What is BS here? It is not what you're expecting, of course, but it's behavioural science. What I'm going to do is take you through a series of case studies and sort of semi presentations and challenge your thinking. This is going to be interactive, so I will be looking to Richard to help me when we have some questions that you can participate in and gives you answers to, and that will build the discussion. So, the art of BS, the art of behavioural science, how reframing can dramatically change outcomes and performance. Now, many of you would have seen this quote. The significant problems we face cannot be solved at the same level of thinking we were at when we created them. It's been attributed to many people. I tend to go with the attribute to Albert Einstein. Now, the key thing here is that same level of thinking. And behavioural science impacts our thinking and our doing. We'll come back to this. Behaviour has a value. So what we need to do here is change your thinking and doing. When we look at the most complex, or what we could term the most wicked of problems, we can look at the National Health Service in the UK, we can look at the outcomes of Brexit, we can look at societal challenges, be it social mobility and other challenges we face. When we look at wicked problems, we need to change the thinking and the doing. We cannot use the same level of thinking, and certainly not the same level of doing, that we had at the time when those problems were created. So what is that different thinking and doing? How do we be more original or be more creative? Well, I like to think we have to be curious to the level of a child. And why do I say that? And I'll take not a quote here, but a statement a very good friend of mine uses, who's a great, I could say, alchemist, as a nod to his book, but also a great magician and a great thinker. And that's Rory Sutherland. To be brilliant, you have to be irrational. We're not going to solve these wicked problems through simple analysis of a balance sheet, cost cutting, incrementalism. We often see, and I've just been on the social media site, LinkedIn, there's a lot of talk about transformation, change. How are we going to get that transformation and change? Through step by step? left brain logical, incremental progress? Possibly over a period of time, but not necessarily within a period of time that we give to transformation. To be brilliant, you have to be irrational. So, what does that mean, and how can we understand that in the context of reframing and reframing challenges? To be irrational, there's a degree of difference, and I use the word diversity in its broader sense here, that cognitive diversity, or something I call poets. P for perspective, O for outlook, E for experiences, T for thinking style or thought style, S for sector and social background. True difference, moulded by your varied experiences and the way that you think or frame problems. To be irrational, to be brilliant. So let's take a case study, and there'll be a question coming your way. For healthcare and well-being, we said one of our wicked problems is obviously healthcare and the NHS. We talk about waiting lists, we talk about treatment. So over to you, the audience. The first question is, what is the most effective medication or drug in the world? And I think you can type answers into the chat.
Yeah, type them in the chat, ladies and gentlemen, and I'll read them out as they come. So this is a free-form question. You can answer in any way you see fit. And for various reasons, I'm seeing nothing. Oh yes, people are typing them in the question box. I've got sleep. I've got coffee. The pill, Ozempic, aspirin, good nutrition, paracetamol, another one for caffeine, nature, positive mindset, another caffeine, warm bed, laughter, yeah, deep breathing.
Laughter. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, there's some more delightful things like chocolate and tea. Okay.
Well, I'll certainly go for the chocolate one. That helps me. That's a personal thing. Caffeine, we are the world's greatest coffee house. If we take Right Honourable Lord Mayor's theme of Connect to Prosper and the basis of the City of London, aspirin came up. If you ask one of our former Gresham professors of physics, obviously Professor Sir Chris Whitty, he will talk about aspirin and its effect on coronary heart disease, and a drug that is readily available at a very low price. I think you said the pill, Zempic, paracetamol, sleep. Yes. These are all valid answers. But the answer is the placebo. If you look at any pharmaceutical trial, the effect of the drug generally is positive in terms of treatment. Sometimes it's not, but one factor of consistency is when a placebo has been introduced, there is a positive effect. Now, I know somebody said, I think the mind and laughter, I came up with answers, and this is crucial now in terms of framing. The placebo, you're not going to go to your doctors or your GPs or your consultants and be prescribed a placebo. But what it says is the context, the framing around a treatment, or if you're in a commercial sphere here, the framing around a customer experience or a business to business experience is absolutely critical. More than any other factor, you can reframe something. And that something could be quite emotive. And I won't do the case study here, but for those who have seen chemotherapy within children's oncology, it's obviously heartbreaking. But to see the same chemotherapy treatment in a different context, where it has been framed as superhero juice, and there's a great case study from Brazil where this has happened, has shown outstanding results in patients' well-being, happiness, which is hard to say in this context, and progress. So the placebo where we talk about framing and experience is critical. And if you look at the research, if that were a drug, that would be the most effective medication or drug in the world. So people who mentioned things such as, I guess, nature, sleep, nutrition, other factors certainly play into your well-being and medication here. So yes, somebody was right when they spoke about a spoonful of sugar helped the medicine go down and obviously helped better outcomes. Now, we're going to move on to another poll, and this one's about driving. Now, we want to encourage good driving, of course, and don't worry, the question is not how many points do you have. The question here is a simple A or B option, and that is, which is more effective in limiting driving offences? In the UK, we have a system where you start with 0 and you gain points up to 12. I don't have any points, I'm glad to say, but I think, for example, 3 points for slight speeding or 3 points for jumping a red light. But you gain points up to 12, at which juncture you can be banned. Option B, you can start with 12 points and lose points down to 0. So I think the question is going to pop up now. Which is more effective in limiting driving offences? Starting with 0 and gaining points up to 12, or starting with 12 and losing points to 0? I'll leave the poll and then I'll progress when we've got some answers in.
But the votes are coming in, Dowshan.
Thank you.
We'll just give people a few more seconds. I think we've
Yeah.
got 35 people voted at the moment. 39.
A and B?
There's quite a big difference between A and B if you
Yeah.
want to get moving. And I can tell you that of the people who voted so far, 80% are voting for starting with 12 and losing points. And only a meager 20% are voting for the starting with 0 and gaining points option.
Okay. Well, I think that's not going to change significantly. So we do have a clear winner there if we can close the poll now.
Yeah, the poll is closed.
And is that 80-20 still, Richard?
It was, yeah.
Yeah. Well, fascinating, isn't it? There you are as an audience saying, starting with X points and losing points to 0 be more effective. Yet here we are in the UK where you start with 0 and you gain points up to 12. The answer is, of course, B. You, the audience, are correct here. So we have this system. A simple reframing of the system could increase the quality of driving or limit bad driving behaviour or reduce bad driving behaviour. There is an interesting system they have in Italy now, and I'm not here to talk about the differences in driving across nations, but in Italy, the driver has 20 points by default. They start with 20. The driver can receive a bonus of 2 points for every 2 years of good driving, with a maximum of 30, which if you were driving very well over a 10-year period, you could achieve. You lose points from that. So here, the simple insight, the simple concept is you value what you earn. It is certainly not a badge of honour to be gaining points as we do in the UK, but you value what you earn, and through a simple system, which we don't have here in the UK, you can see an increased outcome, a better outcome for road safety and the quality with which people drive. The impact is significant when we talk about the societal impact of reduced accidents and the like. Thank you. So reframing and its impact on outcomes. Well, let's get to an emotive topic. How you vote. And it doesn't have to be how you vote for a political party. It could be a referendum. There's an obvious one which we could talk about here in the UK from about 8 years ago. But something that came up in the very recent UK general election only 2 months ago was that of the age of voting. And given that this year, 2024, has seen us with a ridiculous amount of elections from India to the country of my origin, Sri Lanka, obviously here in the UK, my own country, and we've got the big US election as well coming up in about, I think, 6 weeks' time. So question about the age of voting is one that is significant, and like I said, actually came up in some debates here in the UK about 2 months ago. So again, we have a case study, we have the data, and this is a question for you. And there are two questions here in quick succession. The first one is simple: support or oppose. Do you support or oppose reducing the voting age from 18, as it is here in the UK, to 16? So do you support or oppose reducing the voting age from 18 to 16? Some quick answers, please.
And the voting is open, and we're already up to, well, it's moving quicker than I can count actually, but 40 votes in. And I think the percentages are 65% of people have voted. So we're stabilizing. 63% oppose reducing the voting age, and 37% support reducing the voting age.
Okay, let's close that. I'll have another question. You ready? So voting question number 2. Do you support or oppose giving 16 to 17-year-olds the right to vote? So do you support or oppose giving 16 to 17-year-olds the right to vote?
So
Poll's open.
Poll is open, and 50% have voted, 57% have voted, 67% have voted now, probably stabilised, I think. And it's closer to 50-50, so 48% support and 52% oppose. That's a surprising result. All right.
Now, no surprises here. I don't have access to the chat, but we're asking the same thing. For those in the audience that have children who are 16 or 17, if there were election today, would they be able to vote had you supported this? The same question asked slightly differently. Your answers are quite different.
Yeah.
Question 1, which is, do you support or oppose reducing from 18 to 16? I think only 37% supported. Question 2, do you support or oppose giving 16 to 17-year-olds? I think it was 48%. This is the same audience, roughly at the same time. That's an 11 percentage point difference. That's not marginal. That's significant. You've gone from 37 to 48, and you're the same audience. Now, Mori Ipsos did this, and the sample size was much larger, and it was done slightly more scientifically than we're doing today. And I'll share those results with you. Obviously, the focus here is that of reframing. Reframing here, or language matters. You've just shown it live on the Knowledge Miles lecture this morning. 11 percentage points difference, and that's within a minute. We haven't spent any money. We haven't had any political campaigns. We haven't had endorsements from people. We've just asked the same question slightly differently. So framing a language matter, for those who follow the English Premiership, framing a language matter, they can radically change outcomes. Like a referee addressing a substitution here, but more frighteningly like VAR sometimes, and the frustrations we may have around that system. But framing and language matter. So voting question 1, do you support or oppose reducing the voting age from 18 to 16? Here, in the Mori Ipsos poll, 37% supported, 56% opposed. So the majority opposed reducing by 19 percentage points. Sorry, 16 to 17-year-olds can't vote. Voting question 2, do you support or oppose giving 16 to 17-year-olds the right to vote? 52% support, 41% oppose. Radically different outcome. Again, not marginal, but here we've actually shifted completely. Here, the majority support giving by 11 percentage points. happy 16 to 17-year-olds if they want to engage in the political process. Framing impacts outcomes. We haven't had to deconstruct a balance sheet here. We haven't had to go through corporate M&A. Simple framing impacts outcomes significantly, because an outcome like this, as in any referendum, could have significant effects. Here, reframing the question shifts it by 15 percentage points. With you, we shifted by 11 percentage points. The more Ipsos study shows, in one question, we can actually achieve the right to vote for 16 to 17-year-olds, whereas with another, we can pretty much guarantee not. So what does this mean? As we wrap up, I'd like to frame this in the great revolutions. We talk about the agricultural revolution, the movement from land to the cities through the steam engine. And as we had mechanization, the industrial revolution, and how we could productionize, just use that word, and build things and address markets greater than local markets. Obviously, we have the tech revolution as we reached further and the world became smaller and automation went to another level. And of course, we're living through the digital revolution, that of AI, nanotechnology. So where next? What is the next great revolution? What is that revolution to come? My belief, given what we have just spoken about, and given this simple fact that we need technology to better serve us, as opposed to us being the servants of technology, is the psychological revolution, where behavior truly has a value. Behavioral science, psychology, and creativity come to the fore. And as we have just demonstrated, live as well, framing is transformative. So how does framing and psychology impact outcomes? We know this in the UK. We've seen it through Brexit. Do you want a Brexit? Or do you want to remain? Two completely different framings for a same outcome, but obviously a very different result. Elections. We have thoughts in the UK of Scottish independence. All behaviours. More than anything else, more than campaigning, more than strategy, that simple question, that simple framing could help predict or guarantee a certain outcome, worrying as that sounds. So context matters. I'll be doing this, so there's no interaction here. What do people see? I mean, you can type into the chat if you wish. What characters or character do you see? Richard, if there are any answers, do feel free to shout out before I go to a reveal.
Yes, I've got some people saying B, and I've got some people saying 13.
Okay. Now, which is right? We can look at it and say, is it a B or is it 13?
And Jennifer Fouquet is hedging her bets with B or 13.
We'll take a derivative on that one, but we'll hedge. So is it B or is it 13? Well, whoever said B, you were right, because the context matters. It's A, B, C. Whoever said 13, you're right, because context matters. 12, 13, 14. It's the same character, but I can contextualize that as Jennifer. It could be a B, it could be a 13. But as a number of you have said, it's either a B or it's either 13. A wrong answer can be right. Too often we're pursuing the right answer. But it's more important to ask the right question and understand the context. We're the world's greatest coffee house. Many of us have coffees here today as you're watching this Knowledge Miles lecture. Which is the cheapest? A cup of Nescafe, perhaps for those who are at home. A coffee bought from a coffee chain for those who are at a coffee chain, or maybe in an office. Or an espresso made at home. Which is the cheapest? We're not going to answer this. But it depends on context. Whether something is expensive or cheap depends on what you're comparing it to. And when we position products and services, this is critical. Context matters. So the way forward is we bring all of this together. And I know it's been a bit of a rush, but we have some great data. We've got some live polls which show how truly transformative framing is. But what is the way forward? Well, four things. To solve your challenges, use your imagination, reframe problems, wicked problems, reframe opportunities. Take the NHS, affecting all of us here in the UK. Waiting being one of the former government's priorities. We could solve that the traditional way that the highly paid management consultancies, strategy consultancies have been looking at and have continually failed at. Or we can reframe waiting. We can make it a benefit. If you're interested, ask me after this. We have to embrace difference and true diversity to achieve that reframing. And we have to be, a number of C words here, but collaborative, creative, almost childlike. And I'd just like to end with a quote from another friend of mine. And that is, a creative adult is a child who survived. And it comes from a gentleman called Maximilian Buser, who's a CEO of a watch company, MB&F. A creative adult is a child who survived. And by having that sense of curiosity, that sense of fun, that sense of exploration, we can take our most wicked of problems and most significant of challenges and reframe them. So with that, I'd like to end and open it up to you, but thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Dowshan. I've got to admire your courage. If you told me you were going to ask the same question literally seconds apart and expect to see a significant difference in answers, I would have said to you, "Not at these lectures, mate. We're not that stupid." But yeah, it was significant, and I was surprised. So, ladies and gents, please do post your questions in the question box, and then that will be helpful. One thing that immediately occurred to me, Dowshan, is this
Yeah,
how powerful this framing context is, idea is, but how come there's obviously bad framing and good framing? There's
correct.
the evil framing and good framing. And have you got any thoughts for how humble citizens like ourselves should check whether we're being manipulated by a frame?
Well, this is the extreme, isn't it? Well, we can go back to Brexit here. And if we look at that as a case study in 2016, logically, rationally, the UK could still be in Europe in a very emotive topic. I remember seeing a chart that had everybody from the Pope to the then US President, President Obama, supporting the UK staying in Europe. And yet we had a rather challenging debate and challenging framing of the European question here in the UK. Were we manipulated by how that was framed? Take back control, Brexit, versus remain, the status quo. So there, I understand your question there. If you go back to the polling question, there was this reticence to remain at the status quo, which is, do you support or oppose? I think it was reducing the voting age, so taking the status quo and taking it down, versus giving. Now, if you apply that to ourselves, how do we know? I guess you won't truly know is the example. And we talk about power, not necessarily in those that have the most, but can say the most well. And whether it's a simple political slogan, and I won't talk about any parties or any upcoming elections, whether it is a tagline or a catchphrase for a product, they are phenomenally powerful in framing our beliefs and, as a result of that, our behaviours. And yes, we can unfortunately be led down avenues we wouldn't want to be led down.
And Darshan, so Paul Davis also asks what differentiates reframing from manipulation. And I wondered whether there was something in this sort of slow thinking idea that if you take your time and you have a set of beliefs and structures to your personal political philosophy, then you're less likely to be reframed. Is that Is that optimistic, do you think?
I think it's hard, first of all. And again, we're going down the realms of politics. We've got plenty of
Yeah.
business examples here we could apply to, whether it's small businesses, large enterprises, city organizations, or as I just did there,
Yeah, I was
um,
thinking. I
sort
was
of
thinking of
healthcare.
pricing actually. I mean, the pricing example is you often see that go wrong in business, don't you? Where people are determined to price. Often the company price is too low, and it's they haven't understood the context for their own product or service.
I think the best example on pricing I can give is Red Bull. And if you take it from the classic study, you go back 25 years, and this is well documented. You say Red Bull now, and you immediately go to gives you wings, which shows you the power of framing. But 25 years ago, this was a drink that tested so poorly in blind tests. I won't give you some of the verbatims, but it tastes like ... not very complimentary. And some witty, smart person came up with the idea: we'll take this poor tasting drink, we'll put it in a can that's half the size as a traditional soft drink at the time, and we'll price it twice as much. Now try and say that through a board meeting or an executive meeting now. A drink that tastes worse, or actually tests most poorly, will double the pricing and will give you half of it. Irrational.
It's
Yet now Red Bull gives you wings. So
it's
context is
staggering. Yeah,
important.
yeah.
Context is absolutely important. I might be here having a coffee in a certain cafe chain, a certain chain, paying £4 for that coffee. But I'm sat down and I might be presenting. I'm not presenting in a cafe here. I might be presenting. I might be doing some work. It's cheaper than going to an office facility or having an office. So that cup of coffee is very cheap for me versus comparing it to a spoonful of Nescafe, so a spoonful of coffee from the supermarket at home with some hot water and milk, in my case. So that's where context is critical in this juncture. But politically, just to close the question as well, our opinions can be moulded, and this is where I have a very big concern with the media. We often say the media doesn't influence me. Well, you may be right. The media does not tell you what to think, but the media does tell you what to think about. And that word about is critical, because all of that noise, all of that context may be contrary to your beliefs, may be contrary to your views, but it's getting you to think about it. And suddenly your framing is changing and you're asking questions that you may not have asked before.
Yeah, interesting. During the election, I religiously read The Guardian and The Telegraph every day. It was so interesting. I mean, it did a lot of good for me. Right. Sally Burnell from the Bar Council asks, what's the best way to communicate when members of your audience are motivated by different framing? Obviously, segmenting your audience is the best thing, but that's not always possible.
Yeah, and I think you've given your answer there. It's a segmentation, but how do you communicate to these markets? Now, the ultimate is where we are today. We talked about the revolutions, and we're at the digital revolution. You have truly personalized communications online or through social media in many cases. And when I say personalized, you could be on a website and a minute later you go to a certain social media site and adverts from that website appear or relevant to what you're looking at. And there are some both funny and horror stories of people discovering news through just following on the computer from the person before them. So how do you frame when you've got markets of millions to one? Well, you're trying to make an impact. I'm going to go back to be transformative. What are those emotive lines? A bit like what Richard and I were talking about earlier, i.e. the media. What are those emotive lines that cut across audiences, regardless of demographics? What are those psychographical aspects, the beliefs, the opinions? It's a bit like going to a football match. You can see all segments of society supporting a certain team, and we're not going to talk about team allegiances here, but you go into a football stadium, you'll see the young, the old, different income brackets, different social backgrounds, people from different professions. But generally, okay, I'll do it. Even for the Tottenham fans, win, lose, and draw, you'll support that team. I speak as a Chelsea season ticket holder, let me add, so I might get some abuse in a while. But win, lose, or draw, you support that team. And the different audiences buy into that team and what that team is. So when you have a very fragmented audience, yes, you can segment, and most, certainly large organizations, do that and can segment even further now online. But I think above that segmentation, there needs to be a strong emotive message, as we have seen through political campaigns, obviously, all the way through to product campaigns. Even when I was talking about a certain drinks brand there, I automatically went into what their tagline is and obviously what that means in terms of the category. So I still think you need that emotive hook that cuts across diverse audiences, and then you can tailor messaging as much as the medium would allow you to.
And Bob Webb, who has an email address from ANU, Australian National University, which is based in Canberra, I think, asks, how do you test which framing is better when addressing really complex problems? Is it only by pilot type stakeholder surveys or equivalent?
You can test different framings and different audiences. We've just tested a number of questions here on the audience. We tested driving, which we thought was more, which framing would be more effective in encouraging good driving behaviours, limiting offences, but the impact of that is very, very significant, i.e. reducing road traffic accidents, fatalities. We can test, as you said, quite logically. Sometimes we can't test, and this is where there is a degree of being childlike. When we look at the most valuable private entities in the world, listed entities in the world, whether it's Nvidia, Apple, Microsoft, I think that's the top three most valuable entities in terms of capitalization today. They didn't come out through an accountant's balance sheet. They didn't come up through analysis, market testing. They grew through insight and inspiration. And that's hard because I can't give you a pill. Going back to one of the earlier case studies, I can't give you a roadmap to achieve that. But there has to be a degree of insight, a degree of innovation on top of all the rational, linear, left brain. Let's test this, let's do multivariate testing, which you can do. We did it live here with a polling question. We found a question that could almost guarantee, and that was the second one, do you support or oppose giving 16 to 17-year-olds the right to vote? 37% became 48%. And you've seen what the real results are through Mori Ipsos. It was 56%. So yes, you can test that way, but the magic, and I use the word magic deliberately, is having that childlike curiosity, that creative mindset to come up with these truly transformative positionings that have far more effect than any amount of money you can throw at a strategy consultancy or linear management consultancy.
Daniel Descu asks, he's dialing in from the Port of London Authority, I think. He said, what is the benchmark for the new stage that we're going to reach, this sort of psychology-driven behaviour stage? And he also asks, further or additionally, how will it be monetized?
So what is the new benchmark? Here, the basic benchmark, Daniel, comes down to that statement: behavior has a value. Now, it sounds obvious in the context of this presentation, but how many times have you been at a board meeting, at a team meeting, where you're asked to look at a problem? Or if I take a typical board meeting, certainly here in the UK, the bulk of the time, between 70 or 80% of the time, is spent on the balance sheet. What does that mean? We're looking at cost cutting. We're looking at marginal impacts. We're looking at incrementalism. We're not looking at the transformative behaviours. Why? Because it's harder to measure in our traditional UK context. We need to devote more time for creativity. We need to devote more time, as a child would, to fun, playing, and taking those opportunities that are truly transformative. And what we have is not a disregard of the present. We have a solution space like this that may be your linear, rational, left brain, finance, analyzed solution space. And all we're saying is, okay, that's good. But let's do that. Let's expand the solution space. Let's use psychology. Let's use creativity. Let's use BS, behavioral science, to significantly expand that solution space, not just this way, but that way and that way as well. And by doing that, we will truly consider those ideas that we wouldn't have before, or as we did with the last exercise on A and B, so on B or 13, whether it's letters or numbers, context matters. A wrong answer could be right, and we'll ask a different question. Again, the way a child would.
Yeah, and I suppose one of the good and bad things about children is they don't always understand the context for concepts. So, that allows them to make leaps, creative leaps that are, those people who are educated, like what we are, find a bit more tricky.
I'll just give one example, a very short example. When I was in a corporate role in the city, I was business transformation director of a program called Leapfrog, appropriately enough. But what happened? We declared £70 million of savings to the city, which we delivered upon. And the project was all about the frog, not the leap. How were those savings achieved? Unfortunately, through the loss of 1,112 personnel, the closure of a number of sites. So we could declare the savings to the city. Is that leapfrog? Certainly not a leap, which is why I sort of mockingly say the Leapfrog project was more about the frog and not the leap. The leap is truly transformative. Fortunately, a story for another day, we were able to deliver some projects in that area as well. Sorry, Richard.
Right, Dowshan. There's loads of comments in the chat, and they're favourable. Saying
I'm happy to take those when they're sent to me.
Some people are recommending a variety of books. The Master and His Emissary by Ian Gilchrist is one of the books that's recommended by, which you probably know, don't you?
Yeah.
I don't, but you're nodding, so I'm assuming that is
not a 800-page read. It's somewhere here. Yeah, I have it up there.
And various other people have pointed out that lots of data scientists talk about the problem of biased questions, but I think, to be fair, you're talking about something a bit deeper here. It comes up in computer vision, this idea that the recognition that you thought you had isn't really going to work unless you can understand the full visual context of the full visual field. So I thought very powerful and enjoyable lecture. So thank you very much for doing that. Just a quick look forward, ladies and gents. These are some of the things that are coming up in your inbox. I hope you'll find, as usual with this series, they're wildly diverse, aren't they? I mean, that's one of the brilliant things. From council tax to humanitarian surgery in Gaza to behavioural science, you feel very refreshed when you look at this list. So first, thanks to the audience who did an excellent job. I mean, I really enjoyed your questions, and I thought you played along brilliantly. Main thanks to Dowshan, who's royally entertained us, and clearly the audience agrees with that. These lectures are recorded, and so you can nip into our YouTube channel and see them again or recommend them to your friends. As Dowshan mentioned, if you enjoyed this, then you might enjoy turning up to Gresham College, which has a physical presence off Holborn, but also has a YouTube channel, which is a very good listen to. So thank you very much to all of you, and goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you, Rich.